On today's episode of Locked On Wild, you will not believe the level that Matt Boldy is producing compared to his contract. Plus, where do the Minnesota Wild rank on the list of most tortured fan bases in the NHL? And the Athletic ranked goalie prospects. You'll never guess who's on top.
You're Locked On Wild, your daily podcast on the Minnesota Wild, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up? What's happening, everybody? Welcome into another episode of Locked On Wild. We are your daily Minnesota Wild podcast, and we are your team each and every day. We thank you for making Locked On Wild your first listen each and every day. Make sure you subscribe on YouTube and your favorite podcast platform so you don't miss out on any new episodes throughout the week. Today's episode of Locked On Wild is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. On today's episode of Locked On Wild, Alex Micheletti joins us as we take a look at Matt Boldy's contract being amongst the best bargains in the NHL. We'll also talk about where the Minnesota Wild fan base ranks amongst most tortured fans in the NHL, and Jesper Wallstedt getting some love from the Athletic in their goalie prospect rankings. My name is Seth Topal, although I'm starting to think I look more like Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer because, and it's funny too, the sunburn is it's like mid-bridge on the nose, like maybe a little less sunglasses time next time I'm on vacation, but I am still Seth Topal, your host and daily Minnesota Wild insider, joined on a rare Micheletti Friday appearance here by Alex Micheletti. Alex, we pushed things back because I was on a little bit of a vacation, and as I saw on Twitter, pretty much the entire Minneapolis area was out of power for a little bit of time. So we pushed back to the end of the week, and everything is sorted out. And so we are in store for a fun one today.
Oh yeah. Just the content never stops, right? There's always something with this team, and we're thankful for that because they're never boring, as we've said time and time again.
Yeah, it's the gift that keeps on giving, especially in the middle stages of July. So let's dive in because the Athletic, who we will cite multiple times in today's episode, the Athletic ranked the top 10 most valuable contracts in the entirety of the NHL. And some names you'd expect, although I guess I wouldn't have expected Gustav Forsling to be at the top of the list. But they go Gustav Forsling, Jack Hughes, number 2, Miro Heiskanen, number 3, Adam Fox, number 4, Josh Morrissey, number 5, Matthew Tkachuk, number 6, Nathan MacKinnon, number 7, Zach Hyman, number 8, Quinn Hughes, number 9, Matt Boldy, ranked at number 10. And so I'll just read you the blurb, and we'll talk about some of these statistics as well. His current contract, for those that need a refresher, $7 million AAV for the next 6 years. Based off of his production and the expectation that that production will increase, the model has him at $11 million per season for the next 6 years. And so here's what the article says. Matt Boldy's really good. Really good. Last year, at the age of 22, he scored at a 32-goal, 75-point pace and was one of the league's best play drivers at 5-on-5. There aren't a lot of players his age who control and influence the game the way he does from the wing, and the model is a big fan for that reason. He is a star, and the best is yet to come. One of the things that really separates Boldy from the other young players is his complete 200-foot game. Defensive value is often difficult to come by for offensive players his age, but Boldy has it. The Wild, one of the league's best defensive teams, have been way better defensively in back-to-back seasons with Boldy on the ice. His work during the 2022-2023 season was a nice taste of that, and Boldy's 2023-2024 campaign cemented it. His relative expected goals rate over the last 2 years ranks highly amongst top-line forwards, right in line with William Karlsson and not far below Jordan Staal. That gives Boldy a +3 defensive rating going into next year, a high mark that bolsters his solid work offensively. If he can keep that up while turning into an annual point per game forward, he will quickly become one of the league's best wingers. At his age, his value only goes up during the life of his deal. He's already well above the $7 million he's making. So, Matt Boldy's offensive rating, +10 right now. His defensive rating, +13. And the Athletics model predicts that he will be worth $9.7 million next year, 10.4 after that, 10.9 in 2026-2027, 11.4 in 27-28, 11.7 in 28-29, and 11.9 in 29-30. And Alex, he was above an $8 million player in terms of value in the first year of the deal. And so, well done by the Wild here to get the 7x7 done. And just like we talked about with the Joel Eriksson Ek contract, looked a little pricey at first, but Matt Boldy is certainly on his way to turning this into an incredible bargain.
Well, just think, I don't think this was reported a whole lot, but in a recent Athletic article that Russo had, he talked about how Boldy had an injury at the beginning of the year. And so just imagine if he wasn't banged up, his year could have been even, even better than it finished to be, once the coaching change happened. But, it's also been hinted too that, he might be getting some PK minutes, which would be, add to his value even more. He had a phenomenal, end of the season there, and hopefully, he takes that into the fall here and continues it, and getting more time 5-on-5 with the Kaprizov, will do wonders too when you're playing with a guy like that. It creates so much more space out there for him.
And I think Matt Boldy's he's in an interesting spot, because I think there are many people who are giving him the credit for being as good as he has been, while also saying, hey, there's a little more in the tank that he can give. And I think that's a spot where you want a guy that age to be. You don't want to get to that point and say, well, this is the best he has to offer. This is all he's going to be as a player. And that's the exciting part, because, like we've seen with Joel Eriksson Ek, there just has been that steady year-by-year improvement. He's just added a little something to his game every year. And if Boldy follows in that vein, the sky is the limit for what he is capable of producing. I think the things that people point to as biggest areas for improvement are the consistency, because, there were stretches where there wasn't a ton of point production. Overall, the point production was great for the number of games that he played, but there were some stretches where things went quiet. And so consistency and, continuing to find ways to impact the game when he's not on the score sheet. And that's where the defense comes into play.
Penalty kill, potentially.
Yeah, exactly. And so if he can just be a little more steady, and if he can evolve into that point per game type player, or even
I think there's a lot more there on the power play too. There's too much talent on that team, at least for special teams to be even better than they were.
Yeah, I'm with you 100% that there just is an opportunity to be. People want to see the Matt Boldy from March when Kirill Kaprizov was hurt, the one that stepped in and said, get on my back. I am going to carry the team here down the stretch. He doesn't have to do that because Kirill Kaprizov is on the team, but people want to see that same level of impact, even when he's not the one scoring.
He's a player that leaves you wanting a lot more sometimes. You just,
Yes.
it's in him too. And, he just needs to show it more, like you said, more consistency.
And if he does that, then his contract is going to be an absolute bargain.
It's like the one that, Quinn Byfield just got a contract, and I think he's going to way outshine that too. And they're, I think they're similar players. It's gonna be exciting to watch his growth too. But I mean, I think Matt Boldy, he's really taken the heart from Bill Guerin, the tough love, and it's another it's another contract that Bill Guerin, it's a long contract, and he's betting on Matt Boldy to be a leader on this team.
Yeah, and if he takes those steps, that contract's going to be just fine. But at this point, playing above even the initial level that he signed at. So if he can get up close to a $12 million per year player in terms of value,
it's a home run. Well, especially with all the money that we thought was going to be there next year. Whoops. So we'll definitely take that value.
Yeah, we'll take value wherever we can get it. And we know there are at least two guys that are providing surplus value. Surplus. Economics 101. You want to have surplus players. Now, we go from that to a list that honestly I was surprised to see it play out the way that it did. Most tortured fan bases in the NHL. I'll tell you the Wild are in the top 10, but honestly, I am a little surprised as to which end of that list. So we'll talk about that as we continue today's episode of Locked On Wild after this. Today's episode of Locked On Wild is brought to you by eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. The winning formula for winning championships is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you will always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time, or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you are burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. Welcome back to today's episode of Locked On Wild. Once again, we thank you for making Locked On Wild your first listen each and every day. For your second listen, I invite you to take a peek at the wide array of great Locked On shows here in Minnesota, whether it be Locked On Wolves, Locked On Twins, Locked On Vikings, Locked On Golden Gophers, or Locked On Sports Minnesota. There's no shortage of content for your favorite Minnesota sports teams, good or bad. And, especially we talked about the Minnesota Twins and their continued pursuit of the Cleveland Guardians. If you've been keeping up to date with any of the latest surrounding Jordan Addison and the Minnesota Vikings, make sure to give Locked On Vikings a listen, because Luke Braun has everything on lock. So make sure to check out Locked On Vikings for your second listen here today. All right, Alex, Daily Faceoff put together a list of the most tortured fan bases in the NHL, and they ranked all 32 teams, 32-1. The tortured fan base department, ranking the suffering of all 32 NHL fan bases. And I'm going to say this article got me mad right off the bat, because I definitely did not read the numbers first. And I stumbled into this thinking that they put the Vegas Golden Knights as number one. And I was like, okay, we are going to have a problem. Vegas, thankfully, is 32. Because they just won the Stanley Cup. Like, right. You have to be, if you just win the Stanley Cup, you have to be at the bottom of the list.
Right.
Like there just is no.
And the
in
expansion draft, at the time they were able to
being handed to
their
them.
way. Yeah. Here you go, Jonathan Marchessault.
Just Florida is 31, Tampa Bay 30, Colorado 29, Seattle Kraken are 28. Interesting. I suppose because there are just no expectations at this point for them to win a cup, but still.
I don't think. Yeah, they're not a hardcore fan base yet. I think.
True.
Yeah, I mean,
True.
if you start to miss out, multiple years on playoffs, then then the hot seat gets for everybody there.
Let's skip to the top 10. The New York Islanders come in at number 10. And they actually had 6 different contributors for the Daily Faceoff submit rankings. So it's thorough. But the New York Islanders come in at 10. At 9, the San Jose Sharks. At 8, the Winnipeg Jets. At 7, the Minnesota Wild. And here's what Tyler, one of the Daily Faceoff contributors, had to say. The state of hockey has a franchise that has seemingly only put itself in its own way time and time again, doing so at the expense of its fan base. The Minnesota Wild burst on the scene with their magical run to the Western Conference Final in 2003, which let everyone else around the hockey world know this franchise was for real. However, management has seemingly failed to put together anything more than a first-round and out team. Many of the older fans saw this similar story with the North Stars back in the day, 1991 Cinderella run accepted, and are definitely sick of having a mediocre team despite the promise of something more. The collective rankings for the Wild were 6th, 8th, 7th, 10th, 8th, and 7th. My question: who could possibly be in front of the Minnesota Wild? Well, coming in at number 6 is the Columbus Blue Jackets. Coming in at number 5 is the Ottawa Senators. Coming in at number 4 is the Philadelphia Flyers. Coming in at number 3, the Vancouver Canucks. Number 2, the Buffalo Sabres. And the number 1 most tortured fan base, and I don't have a problem with this as number 1 at all. Number 1, the Toronto Maple Leafs. It was a unanimous selection for number 1 for the Toronto Maple Leafs, a team who just has become more synonymous with first-round playoff exits than the Minnesota Wild. But here's my thoughts on this list, Alex, and I'm intrigued to get your thoughts as well. I feel like there needs to be a little bit more of a little bit higher of a ranking given to the never been theirs as opposed to the never won ones. And that's where I think the Minnesota Wild need to be higher on this list, because it's one thing to get there and not win a cup. It's another thing entirely to have really never been close to getting to one.
Yeah, because you never you never get that feeling at all. Just being in the Stanley Cup, we see how much just excitement it brings to a fan base. And I mean, look at how excited Edmonton was to finally get there with Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl. And, you saw how bitter they were losing that, to get so far and then to lose it. And so to not even get there yet, it's just the frustration continues to build. And you can imagine Minnesota having that here with this franchise, the X West 7th. I mean, it would top anything, the rest of the league, no doubt.
Yeah, it just like whichever team in this state wins one next, wins one first,
yes,
is going to be immortalized. There will be statues, there will be jersey retirements, there will be rings of honor for entire teams. Like, honestly, that seems kind of crazy. Like, you have your Ring of Honor or whatever for the Vikings or your Hall of Fame for the Twins. Whichever team next wins a championship in this state, that entire team is going to get immortalized in those Rings of Honor because it has been that long since it happened. The state of Minnesota has the longest combined number of seasons without a championship in professional sports.
Well, look at this. So I'm 33 years old. The last time we had a men's championship was the Twins winning the World Series in 1991, and I was a couple months old. It's been that long. It's
I was 3 years old when that happened. You think I remember it?
Me either. It's just crazy to think, because that is such a long time, and so much has happened in the world. Yeah, it's unbelievable.
And so, respectfully, I mean, I can't put the Wild ahead of the Maple Leafs because the Maple Leafs have been a perennial contender every season.
And look at
it comes up short.
And they've had a guy score 60 plus goals, Austin Matthews. I mean, that core four that they have, to the amount of talent, they blow the Wild out of the water, and it's just
100%.
disappointment after disappointment. And give credit, I mean, Toronto has such a passionate fan base too, just like the Wild. And so if they are the Canadian team to pull it off, that how crazy it would get there too.
It'll be nuts. But I just 7th on the list, that's too low. That's too low for, and maybe I'm being too like encompassing the entire history in the state of Minnesota. Maybe I need to be more thinking about the Wild, but even still,
they're right there with Buffalo too. I mean, Buffalo, Minnesota sports, they go hand in hand, just
forever entwined in futility.
Right. Yeah, especially in Super Bowls, but the hockey too. It's just, I mean, you've seen the graphic that's been on X there of just the lineups that Buffalo has had, the guys that have moved on to other teams. It's insane. And to not do better with Jack Eichel is just crazy too. Yeah. I'm glad he got out of there and was able to get a Stanley Cup, but yeah, just amazing the amount of talent that, look at what they have now. Tage Thompson, Dylan Cousins, look at all the firepower on the back end, Dahlin and Owen Power. They should not be missing the playoffs with that talent.
Nope. They super shouldn't. And it's crazy too. The two most recent high profile players that Buffalo got rid of in Jack Eichel and Sam Bennett. They both Sam Reinhart. Thank you. Yeah. They both won the two most recent Stanley Cups.
Yeah, it's insane. And the trade backs, yeah, it's like, oh man.
So I respectfully disagree with the Daily Faceoff. I think the Minnesota Wild should be higher, but seventh best on any list is, I guess, a good thing. Not in this case, though. So we hear you, Wild fans. We want it just as bad as you do. And not to fully steal the moniker from Wild on 7th from our podcast colleagues, we're here until it's here. That is my goal as host of this show, is to deliver a Stanley Cup, to then be able to spend the entire offseason being absolutely insufferable to the rest of my Locked On NHL colleagues.
Right. Do you remember it was a couple of years ago, the craze that, like, that app where you could age yourself? I hope we're not doing Locked On Wild when we're 70 and we're still waiting for that Stanley Cup, to put like on here on the graphics. How many days have we been waiting for a cup? Yeah.
10 more seasons of this, and I'm gonna have to get a camera that looks at you from underneath, because I'm gonna be like tilted forward.
SpongeBob meme where he's been watching the TV and his eyes are just trooped out.
fully bugged out. Well, we'll see how that plays out, but a potentially key figure in helping erase that drought just landed on the number 1 spot in the Athletics goalie prospect rankings. Yes, the Wall is tops of them all. We'll talk about that to finish today's show after this. Today's episode of Locked On Wild is also brought to you by Game Time. We are in the second half of the MLB season. There is nothing better than heading to the ballpark to spend a glorious summer day, grabbing some beverages, a hot dog, sitting out in the outfield seats, getting that tan going like I did this week. It's just the best way to spend your time. And Game Time wants you to have more of those memorable trips without having to spend all your time worrying about if you can even get tickets for a particular game. Game Time is an authorized ticket marketplace of Major League Baseball, which makes getting tickets faster and easier. Prices on the Game Time app, get this, prices on the Game Time app actually go down the closer it gets to first pitch. Not only that, but Game Time also offers you some great incentives like zone deals. You pick a section, Game Time will pick your seats. All that and their lowest price guarantee. If you find seats that are cheaper, Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. Take the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Final segment of today's episode of Locked On Wild. Once again, we thank you for making Locked On Wild your first listen each and every day. We got a bonus episode coming for you later today. Isha Jerome of the Soda Pod stopped by, and we put together a Minnesota Wild Mount Rushmore. Not only players, but seasons. So a couple of good talkers there for you to get you into the weekend with a double dose on your Friday. I told you we would get caught up by the end of the week. So daily double Friday for you here to end the week. Alex, the Athletic put out an article with their top goalie prospects for 2024. Scott Wheeler did the honors, one of the
excellent writer,
premier prospect writers for the Athletic. Here are the qualifiers. To be considered a goalie prospect, a goalie must be under 25 years old. This age criteria is more reflective of the typical goalie trajectory, allowing for the continued consideration of a small number of 23 and 24-year-old goalies. Also not currently established as one of their NHL club's 2 go-to options, which as of right now, Philip Gustafsson, Marc-Andre Fleury, Jesper is not technically one of those 2 options. So here are the top 20 prospects in the league. Number 1, Jesper Wallstedt. Here's what Scott Wheeler has to say. Wallstedt, who I've often talked about as a robot, had moments last season where really for the first time in his career, he looked human. His body of work and game still combined to make him arguably the best goalie prospect in the sport for Wheeler. Though, and it's also important to contextualize him against last year's team in Iowa, which really struggled defensively, and against his tandem partner and veteran Zane McIntyre. Wallstedt had a winning record and a .910 save percentage, while McIntyre struggled to just 2 wins and finished with an .881 save percentage. Struggled just to win games, I stand corrected, because I think he had 4 wins.
He's out of the organization now. That tells you everything.
Struggled just to win games and finished with an .881 save percentage. Wallstedt's game has real polish and maturity. It's important to remember that even at 21, and even though last year was already his second AHL season, he was still one of the youngest goalies in the league. There's just a control and soundness to his game that is rare in goalies his age. He's also a big 6'3", 214-pound fills the net too, goalie, who plays sharp lines positionally, holds those lines, and swallows the first shot so that he doesn't have to make a ton of second saves. He's incredibly calm in the net, staring down shooters and reading them. He covers the bottom of the net extremely well and doesn't seem to get beat along the ice. Few shots sneak through him. His movement is compact. He tracks through layers incredibly well to find pucks, and he reads opposing shooters so well that he's rarely beaten cleanly. There's a minor question mark or two around every young goalie in the sport, and with Wallstedt, I don't see an obvious hole or area of weakness that worries me, though I do think he could stand to be in better shape. He doesn't steal games quite like Predators goalie, for now, prospect Yaroslav Askarov, but his consistency in his young career has, to use a cliche, always seemed to give his team a chance to win. Wheeler would maybe like to see him develop a little more quickness. He's strong across the net and low to high on pushes, but he sits a little heavy over his skates, and Wheeler wouldn't say his feet are fast per se. But otherwise, he's got all the makings of a number one goalie in the NHL, and I'd be surprised if he doesn't become a good 1A at minimum. A lot of good things to say about Jesper, but Alex, as we have discussed a few times since the season ended, and even during last season as well, there's going to have to be a choice made, because you have to ask yourself one of two questions. Is Jesper going to be better suited with another year in Iowa, or will he learn more by getting an opportunity to really just cut it at the NHL level?
I'm really nervous if he has to spend another year in Iowa. I know they made a ton of signings, over the summer to try to, change things, and they hired, another a different assistant coach down there. So maybe things will be a little bit different. They signed the Travis Boyds of the world, and Devin Shores. But I think for his development, it's going to be so much better if he can spend more time up here. The 3 goalie system, I don't see that being good for anybody. I know I put it out on X, but I don't see how you keep 3 guys happy by keeping them all up here. So I mean, there's still time to think about trading Gus. We'll see. But because he's got an attractive contract out there for a 1A goalie, 1A, 1B. So we'll see. I mean, with the goalie, position, there tends to be injuries. So a team could get desperate and try to reach out to Bill Guerin. So we'll see. And there's still the Patrick Laine interest out there. So if they really want him, they would have to move Gus. So yeah, we'll see.
I'm sure Dean would be thrilled to be reunited with both Gus and Freddie Gaudreau the moment he signs.
For all we know, Dean's in Columbus right now. So we'll see if they get it to the finish line.
I'm telling you, I have heard many other people say that they don't think Dean is like the finalist for that Columbus job. Don Waddell is an old school guy. Dean Evison is an old school coach.
No doubt. Look at the guy that they wanted. They can't come to an agreement. Todd McClellan, who's also been around the block, but is an old school as they get. So that was interesting that they couldn't figure it out with him.
I don't know what was more surprising about that, the fact that they couldn't come to an agreement, or the fact that he was making $5.5 million to coach the Kings.
So what a life. What a life, right?
Monopoly money.
Yes. Coaches,
but anyway,
coaches can make a ton too.
But anyway, I agree. The 3 goalie system, I feel like just leads to guys going extended stretches of not playing.
Right.
Which leads to nobody getting warm.
No.
which leads to if somebody gets hurt, then somebody has to warm up to try to get requisite starts to be effective.
I don't think Marc-Andre Fleury signed. He didn't come back to waste his time, in a 3 goalie system. No way.
We're going to get a bunch of August trades, aren't we?
It's going to be quiet, but these GMs, they get antsy, and especially, especially once training camp gets going here, I'm sure it'll pick up.
Because the other thing I worry about too, if Jesper were to have another year in Iowa, doesn't he just get bored?
Right.
Because the talent level at the AHL is pretty capped. Like you have some teams that have a ton of good prospects.
Yeah.
But by and large, you are facing a bunch of guys who are trying to work their way back to the NHL level or have hit their ceiling. And so at some point, I feel like it's the same thing. It's like with me when I play Madden against the computer.
Mm-hmm.
After a while, you just kind of zone out, and you're like, well, I'm just gonna, because I can clearly beat these guys, I'm just gonna do this over and over and over again to try to kind of cut the boredom, and that's where the bad habits come in.
And just like with defensemen, I know you've brought this up in prior episodes, you can protect certain players, you know, when they're out on the ice, their minutes. It's the same thing with goalies. I mean, you can, get them, you can play them on the back end of of a team that's on the back end of a back-to-back. You can play them against the San Jose's of the world, the Chicagos, the Anaheims. Dear Lord, are they awful? I mean, so you can you can find games for Gus to get reps and get in a groove as a full-time NHLer for sure. I see that pushback a lot that, hey, he's not ready. Well, when is he going to be ready? When it's
what needs to be proven at Iowa to convince people that he is ready? I would argue putting up the numbers that he did with the team in front of him that he had is probably a good enough indicator that he's ready to go.
Right. I mean, he had to battle his tail off to even get the results that he did. And you can't pin the Dallas, that debacle, the debut, because everybody saw it coming. They could have played him against Arizona, but they decided to play him against Dallas on national TV. His parents had to move, it was planes, trains, automobiles to get his father there. That was just tough because you just knew it was not going to go well just based on how the team was playing up to that point.
Yeah, I think he's ready to go.
Yeah.
And yes, I know there will be those that say, it's not a bad thing to have a guy ready, but not give him that opportunity quite yet. It's like if you're studying for a test, you learn all the source material, and it doesn't matter if you wait a day or a week. There's going to come a point where it's like all you're going to know.
Well, it's not like
the test.
It's not like he was playing pro over there, in like Sweden, because then that's a completely different game than North American hockey. So he's been in Iowa. He's cooked. He's marinated. So give him a shot, and you can always send him down. It's not like he has to go on waivers, so he can.
Right, and you've got other guys. You've got other guys in the organization.
Right.
If you would trade Gus,
right,
which I am not in favor of,
right.
If you would trade Gus,
yeah.
Then you've got that. I forget the last name of the guy, but he's like 34.
Right.
He's had NHL experience.
Grosnick. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
You could bring him up. You could bring him up to fill a spot if you need to. But this is my whole theme and my whole line of thinking for this season is just start giving guys chances to win jobs.
Yes,
that's all. That's as simple as it needs to be.
It's experimental time for this team.
Bingo. Perfect spot to leave it for today. So we're going to sign off for today's episode, but thank you to everybody for tuning in to yet another episode of Lockdown Wild. Even though we are in the off season, the content does not stop. So make sure that you hit the like button and subscribe so that we can continue to get the reach out for these episodes and further bring Wild fans to the Locked On Wild community. So like today's episode, subscribe on either YouTube or your favorite audio platforms so you don't miss out on any new episodes, which we have for you every Monday through Friday as part of the Locked On Podcast Network.